Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, we are live. We've been struggling to connect from Zoom to Facebook. I hope you guys can see me. Let me actually check in my other device if this is actually streaming live so that we don't move ahead and leave you behind. Just a second. I just want to see. Oh, yes, we are live. Um, Feel free to share with your friends and invite them, because this is one of the most important conversations that we need to have in the choral sector. In fact, in the arts sector as a whole, because it involves the future of our industry. As we will be focusing on talent development, education, and career opportunities. And of course, whatever else that comes through in the discussion, we won't really restrict our guests. This afternoon, I am joined by young, talented, and very influential colleagues in the choral music sector. One of them is Mr. Thembela Vokwana from the music department at the University of Fort Hare. Mr. Vokwana, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mhlekazi. Nakunba phulaphuli.
Yes, I seem to be struggling with my other guests. Let me have a look at the next one. Mr. Makwethu, he seems to be struggling with the video. Masixole, can you hear me? Marcy, can you hear me? I do see his name. I cannot see him. Let me check Mr. Mding. Monde, are you still there? Okay, it seems like their connection is still struggling at this point in time. We will continue whilst they are still trying to connect. Let's continue, Tina, until they manage to join the stream. Last week, I had Umonde one-on-one conversation, and some questions came up. And one of those questions led to this discussion, which was not the only one that was asked around the importance of young singers going to study at tertiary institutions, and whether or not it is important, you know, for the arts to be recognized as a worthy career. And the person who asked the question even went on to say, some feel it is useless to go to school. Talent is good enough for people to navigate their way through the career in the arts. So what's your take on that?
Nkosi, Patinkuba. I think it's very important for anybody who wants to learn about a field. Let's just first talk about fields before we even move to the arts. I think anybody who has got an interest in a particular field of knowledge, field of practice, needs to have specialized knowledge and specialized training. And I think the arts are not any different. So I think it's important, Uguti, if a person wants to learn how to sing and be a great singer, that person needs to be trained. If a person wants to teach performance or history or other fields of music, you know, music and business, orchestration, all sorts of things that people learn within the field of music and performance in general, I think it's very important to go and train in that field and have a specialized skill, specialized knowledge. And of course, that specialized skill and knowledge should be built on a foundation of broad general knowledge on other fields within, or on other areas within the same broad field. Which means that if you are a singer, it's equally important to know your theory, your oral, your languages that are relevant for singing, the history of vocal studies, or the history of like vocal pedagogy, the histories of music, you know, African music, world music, and all other fields within the field of performance, music performance.
You've mentioned quite a bit of things that people learn when they get to universities, you know, as singers. Now, if you could speak to someone who does not understand, you know, what we're talking about, that parent whose child all of a sudden says they want to go study, you know, music, because music is regarded as a hobby in many instances. So if you could talk to that parent whose child wants to study music and explain why this is important, what would you say to that parent? Because I know many young singers out there, especially those that are at school, at high school, they do want to study music, but the parents don't really understand that as a career that one can follow. We know about doctors, we know about lawyers, we know about nurses, you know, accountants, all these other careers. So what would you say to that parent?
I would first say to that parent, encourage your child not only to be talented in music, but also to work generally across the different subjects as fundayo within the high school level, because first of all, that child needs to qualify to get into a tertiary institution. So if that child has to get into a university like ours, Fort Hare, that child has to have a bachelor qualification, the bachelor pass at matric. In other institutions, I think you can get in with a diploma pass. But you may not have done music before. Some universities, they take you if you have not done music before, as long as you can do well in the audition. But in addition to passing the audition, you have to qualify to get into the university itself. And the universities have got their own qualifying criteria, regardless of whether you're going to study music or engineering or whatever. And that's the first thing. The second thing, you might want to encourage your child, while they're very good in singing or in playing the piano or playing the violin, to develop a sensitivity to reading and writing, to develop an interest in reading and writing. Because subjects like history of music, history of opera, you know, world music, and a couple of other subjects that, or maybe music as business, the different subjects that a person will learn as soon as they get into the university require you to be able to read and write well and have a solid comprehension of facts and ideas. You need to encourage your child to be versatile. They're not going to sing all the time. They're going to need to play the piano, to be able to read music, staff notation. They're going to have to be able to engage with oral training and oral perception. They're going to have to learn to write music. In some universities, they're going to have to deal with foreign languages like French, Italian, German. And in other universities, they might be required to take an extra course or two that are non-music but can be taught in a school, or that are within the faculty of humanities and social sciences or faculty of arts, depending on how the university is structured. So while your son or daughter is studying music, they might have to take philosophy and psychology, or they might have to take another subject they may teach in a school. Maybe geography, first and second level, or sometimes it really depends on the structure of the university. They might have to take a couple of other things, you know, studies in theater, studies in film, and depending on where they study, so that they understand also the relationship between music and other related arts like drama, like theater, like, you know, film, and the whole universe of performance, so to speak. So which means when they get to university, they have to be prepared to work in their art, to practice and refine the technique, which means your child, as soon as they get into the university, they have to improve so that they work their technique towards a professional standard. But almost always they'll be required to take a second instrument. In most universities, it's a piano if they're majoring in voice, but it could be something else. And they have to have a certain level of proficiency in that instrument by the time they graduate. And so a music degree or a music diploma is quite heavy. So your child also needs to be advised to plan their time, to be able to work hard. Because one of the challenging things about studying the arts and performance is that you've got these big books that has got issues around history, sociology, anthropology of music, and a couple of other things. But in addition to that, you have to learn the repertoire of your first and second instrument. But you also are a part of ensembles. So you might find that your university is going to have 2 productions or 1 production at the end of the year or end of the semester. So in addition to your repertoire, you also have to learn these other repertoires of other things you're part of. And so it is performance heavy, but it's not only just performance heavy, it is also reading, study heavy. There's quite a lot of reading you have to do. There's a lot of listening you have to do. There's a lot of analysis you have to do. And your child then cannot just simply come to your university and say, all I want to do is to sing. Even if a person is not, because some people think, if I go to TUT and I do music theater and I engage with popular music, I'm just going to sing whatever. But you still have to read quite a lot. So just about every single department of music in the country has got lots and lots of reading and lots of writing, lots and lots of listening, and of course, lots and lots of performance. So it is just work, 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 work. But the beautiful thing about studying music is that you're doing work, the results of which you see right away because you go on and perform, you get to the stage and you love what you do. But there are also those quite difficult moments like writing tests, writing assignments, submitting on time, dealing with failure sometimes, dealing with success sometimes, and it's constant improvement.
Yeah, before we move on and perhaps dive deeper into how all of this is taught and what other careers are like possible parts within the arts industry, mostly in music. Let me check once again. Monde, Sasa, Masixole, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you now.
You can hear me. Let's see if you can start your video. Can you make that effort one last time? Because we do want to see you.
Mine says you need to allow me.
Okay, now I've just allowed you. Let's see if you can. Because I really want to bring you. Finally, Mr. Makwethu is here. Welcome, Mr. Makwethu. Makwethu is joining us. He is from the outreach department, community outreach department from the Cape Town Opera Company, the biggest opera company we have in Africa. And Masixole has the privilege of going around the country with studio singers from the Cape Town Opera, demonstrating the prescribed solos for the young ones who are singing in the Sasuke ABC Motsipe competition. They run the workshops, they demonstrate how these pieces can be sung, and they work on vocal technique, even though it's for a very short space of time. Masi, you've just joined us. Mr. Vokwana was talking about what students learn when they get to universities, all the different subjects within, music. I'm sure you're aware of that. They study languages, they study theory, they study history, they study movement, they study, other related, factors that will make up a complete musician. Now, let me bring you in Kule conversation. When you guys go around as the Cape Town Opera, running the workshops, with the young singers, do you perhaps include, the aspects of the career in singing music, more especially in the opera, just to enlighten the young ones on what else is there? Because before you came through, Thembela was talking about the fact that you don't just go to a music school and sing just because you love singing. There are other things that require you to read extensively. So when you run these workshops, so what else do you bring into the workshop?
While I was struggling to actually log in, I actually saw Mr. Vokwana's comment as he was talking. And mine really will focus on the career opportunities in the arts. And I'm just going to give a brief example of something that happened this year in the national tour. So I'm in one of the towns, we are doing the workshop, and I realized that it's quite important that the most important thing first is to empower teachers and school conductors. I'll tell you why. During the workshop, I meet one of the teachers I knew from when I was a learner. And then in our conversation, we are discussing, what do you do, Masixole, now? So I tell you what I do.
Masi?
And the next thing that comes out of her mouth shocked me, because she then says, yes.
Oh yeah,
Can you hear me?
Got cut. Yeah, you got cut a bit there. So if you could repeat a bit.
Okay, so me and the teacher conversate about what I do now for a living. And then she summarizes, she says, oh, and then I say, yes, I do. And then her next thing is, but Makwethu used to be so intelligent. What happened? And I stood there for a second. I was astonished. And this lady has been teaching for 22 years to say such a thing. And then it made me realize that I think that's where we need to start. That's where we need to start empowering with knowledge about opportunities and careers in the arts. Because for some strange reason, I don't know how she believes that I needed not to be intelligent to be a musician, because that's exactly what she insinuated in that conversation. And for me, also, the reason why it's important to empower teachers and conductors is because Masixole goes to these schools 1 month a year. So it's quite important to leave the knowledge with the teachers so that they instill it with the learners. For example, most kids know that to be a singer, you just need to sing. And everything Mr. Vokwana just said now is nothing about abayazi don't. So it's quite important that they know it, payana, ubana, and also not just about being a singer, but what happens if singing doesn't work out? What do you do? Do you just give up? So it's quite important that we outline the opportunities, like if you can't be a singer, you can be a director, you can be a conductor, you can be a stage manager, you can be a production manager, you can be a lighting designer. There's lots of things in the arts that still allow you to be part of the experience if singing does not work out.
Yes, I am. Okay, continue.
And for me, I feel like conductors in high school choirs should be the ones, because they work with the kids one-on-one, so they know their weaknesses and strengths. So it should be easy for them to say, I think in one month, how about you look at it this way? When they've got this knowledge, they can actually instill that to the learners.
Yes, I was going to chip in the last sentence you made about one being a director or one being a lighting designer, but one being part of the experience. I was listening to one of the interviews ebezenziwe no Professor Angelo Gobato last year, I think 2019, where he says when he started out, he wanted to be a singer. And then he went on to sing, but things didn't actually work out the way he wanted to. He ended up studying towards science. He had a degree in science. And then later on, he went back again to Mr. Mtingi, are you back now? Because I'm hearing you in the background. Okay. So when he went back, eventually he became one of the greatest directors we know today who influenced opera in South Africa. But initially he wanted to sing. So Mr. Vokwana, when you look at how, just generally, how we work in the country, be it in the choirs as conductors or at university and teachers, I think we're getting a lot of interference from Mr. Mdingi.
Yeah, can you mute the
Try
sound?
and mute him because I still cannot see him, even though I see his name. So sorry about that. Mr. Vokwana was saying, be it at school, teachers, or at university with lecturers, vocal teachers, private teachers, and choir conductors, music associations. And are we really doing enough to prepare these young singers for the industry where they will work? Are we preparing them for an industry, or we just in choirs, we're just singing, go to competitions, that's it? University, get in, study your thing, get your diploma or degree out, then you see for yourself. So are we really preparing these young people for the industry?
There are a number of things that need to be raised here. One is that I think different people try in different ways to prepare the young people. But the biggest question is whether that is enough or not. I think when there is clear and impactful career guidance in the arts, then we can say that is enough. But there's also other crucial things around what you have raised. And one of those being, do we actually have an industry? Do we have a productive, structured, active arts industry? I think that is a question that the response there is a yes and a no. And of course, it could take us the whole day to really engage with that. But artists are complaining about lack of jobs. Artists are complaining about lack of consistency in their employment. So you work today, you work for a month, you get good money, but you don't know whether the next time you work is going to be a year after. And so while we may prepare the students very well, but I think there needs to be a vibrant, exciting, well-structured, well-maintained industry to absorb as a workforce the students that we train and teach, the talent we produce, the talent that we have in this country. So I think that's one dynamic of the arts in general. But I also think enough is a problematic notion. I think all industries are always in a flux, and which means we always have to be aware, Ukuti, what are the changes taking place in the industry? What are the new knowledges? What are the new skills? And which means anybody who is in the arts always needs to be skilled, but also de-skill and re-skill. You cannot necessarily always say, I was very good in this in 1995, or I was trained this in 1995. We are close to 30 years since 1995. And within that context, I think 30 years later, whatever you were good in might no longer be that much important, which means artists need to learn a couple of other things that are important for the industry, including multidisciplinary knowledge, practice, and skills. You cannot always just be that musician who does not know how to operate a couple of other things. We cannot always be that music teacher who does not know. We can't live as artists. We can't live in silos. We can't, it's very difficult to simply just go there and say, all I know to do, and all I know to do very well as Thembela, it's just to sing. You might need to know a couple of other things. You might need to understand the world within which you sing, so that you understand the legal issues around your singing, the marketing issues, the visual issues in terms of your image, in terms of your PR, in terms of many other things. You might even have to, like right now, here we are, we're having some kind of a meeting across Zoom, which means musicians also have to understand their relationship with the fourth industrial revolution. We cannot fold our arms and say, brown cover, notes. That's all I need to do. These days, we use Sibelius to write music and all sorts of other things, all sorts of other software. So it's quite important for musicians to know this software, to have a contribution in how this software is designed, so that we have got a better knowledge of how to use it, how to impact on the software, how to be part of the fourth industrial revolution, and so on. And of course, these things are easier to say than do, but I think we need to be alert about the changes that are happening in our world, so that as musicians, we are contributors, we are active participants, and we are at the forefront of that change.
Yes, Marcy, let me bring you back in this industry talk. Fortunately, you work for a big opera company. What do you think is the kind of contribution that we need to make? Because Mr. Vokwana has just mentioned that we need to know that we are contributors in the economy. So what kind of contribution are we making as artists? Maybe other people are not aware that artists are really contributing and hence deserve to be, on the mainstream of things in the country. We will get there, because from this, I want to go to this notion of the arts being disorganized and hence lack direction and all of that. We'll talk about that in a bit. But what kind of contribution are we making?
I think before we talk about in a normal situation, let's talk about the lockdown. Let's talk about the COVID-19 lockdown. If you open social media right now, you will find a singer, you will find a DJ, you'll find artists all over social media, keeping everyone calm, keeping everyone sane in a time where everything is uncertain. That's how important artists are. And I think it's very important to understand how important you are as an artist. And number two, Mr. Vokwana mentioned career guidance. I think it's quite important that we involve the Department of Education in this, to say, career guidance, because I think when I was in school, there was something called career guidance. And also, we add the arts in career guidance. How do you become a nurse, a teacher, and a lawyer? And he said, in the past 30 years, things have changed. Like a lot of kids that are out there want to be a DJ. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how do you become a DJ and what are the pros and cons? How do you go about doing that? So it's quite important that we change with time. And it's quite important for us to be versatile. Like I said, opera has changed from 1995 to 2020. It's more contemporary. In opera that used to be ball gowns is now full of choreography. The costume has changed. And you get singers that have to sing, dance, and be able to pull a dialogue. So these are the things that you need to have, not just a stand and deliver, but be able to move with time. Like Mr. Vokwana, I agree with him fully. We need to be able to go with time and be versatile as musicians. And not just musicians, but as artists, because all of these things are intertwined. They're all together. The arts is one place, because you'll find a choreographer who's a dancer in an opera. You'll find a libretto writer in drama, in singing. So they're all together. You can't separate them. You really can't separate them. We must talk about the performing arts when we speak about it. We should call it the performing arts. Then, because an opera singer trained with stagecraft can be an actor, can go on stage and act on Generations and become an actor that does the singing roles, for example. So that's who we need to be. That's how we should think as musicians and as artists and as performing arts.
Now talking about being versatile and being creative and finding your niche and you know exploiting that niche to your advantage. I want to use you as an example, so that you speak about this maybe a little more. You got employed by the Cape Town Opera for specific duties.
Okay.
But when you got into the building, you began to watch operas, you saw so many things, to an extent that currently when we go to Cape Town Opera to watch any production, we find subtitles written in Xhosa, isiXhosa. Zange safika kuhamba isiXhosa pha phezulu. Kudla ngoba i-English eyona that is closer to what we understand. But currently, sithi xa simamele pha besitsho nge-French or Italian or German, kube kuhamba isiXhosa apha phezulu. And I know that you sit down and you translate this thing into isiXhosa, so that even abantu abaza kwi-theatre bezoyibukela bengamaXhosa can actually understand. So how important is it for artists, to look for opportunities wherever they find themselves?
So let's talk about the Xhosa subtitles. Because I work in outreach, and the idea is to entice young people on opera. And that's how the Xhosa subtitles came about, because most of the kids around that go and watch our final dress rehearsal speak isiXhosa. And we're looking at adding other languages. But the most important thing is that because time has changed and we are trying to entice and make opera fashionable to people who are more into Gom, we need to find a way to make them understand. Because when you sit in an opera, and I remember watching Don Pasquale after I wrote the subtitles, and I had the kids laughing the whole time, and people didn't understand that we then allowed the kids to be part of the experience. Because like it or not, as much as we speak English, but it's delayed when you watch it and read the English and you're trying to understand it at the same time and you miss half of the stuff. But now when it's in your mother tongue, everything is there. And now in terms of being versatile, it's quite important to be curious as an artist. I'll make an example. A stage manager. A stage manager is someone who sees to it that everyone is on time on stage and everyone is there doing what they're supposed to be doing as per the director's note. And now it's quite important that as a stage manager, you can read music because you go with the score. A musician, any singer who can read music should be able to do stage management when trained properly, because all you need to do is sit down with a score and look and say, Masi, 5-minute call, because you've counted the bars, you know exactly when Masi is coming in, you know your music. So it's quite important that you are curious. We need to be curious as musicians. We need to be curious as performing people. And that's how I got to subtitles, writing subtitles for Cape Town Opera.
That is great. That is great. I hope singers, young singers in particular, who are watching this stream or who will watch the video maybe later, teachers and colleagues out there, you will then begin to think things differently, how we empower the young ones, encourage them to experiment, encourage them, to visit theaters, try by all means, to bring in new knowledge. they might be sitting there not knowing that they could become great directors. I mean, we have a very big shortage of orchestra conductors who are Black, not because there's no potential, there is potential, but we lack knowledge, we lack opportunities. I think those of us, a few that have seen the other side, we need to do a bit more. Now, Mr. Vokwana, let me bring you back, more especially as a lecturer. When a young student enters university to do law, for instance, they know at the first year level that somewhere they'll have to write a board exam before they can become a lawyer or an advocate. Accountants know at some point in life they're going to write articles and they're going to do this and this board exams, and then they'll be admitted as chartered accountants. Do we have that kind of structure when it comes to the arts generally, maybe in music or in other fields of arts, where when the first years enter university, already there's a sense of where they are going with this and where they might end, you know, whether as specialists or as general practitioners, as in the case of doctors. Do we have that kind of structure, and how the industry actually relates to other industries? How are we affected by other industries, and how do we affect other industries or other careers in general?
Right. Like I said earlier, this is a question of a yes and a no. The South African industry, especially classical music, I think sometimes when we talk about the industry, the music industry or the performance arts industry, we should not always use the same umbrella. I think popular musicians, they're more or less faring better, whereas I think classical musicians not as much. And these are the things that one wishes that the government could intervene, the Department of Arts and Culture, in developing a better structure, so that there's an industry that is continuous, that is always actively working. For instance, you go to any law or any legal related business, there's always work there, people are working. I think with a better structure in this country, we should also have seasons where we know that we've got the summer season, we've got the winter season in this opera house or in this city hall. There's going to be 11 shows because there is money that has been given, part of the budget. There's going to be 11 shows the first semester of the year, 11 shows the next semester of the year. There's going to be 3 operas or 2 operas. There's going to be this number of symphonies. There's going to be this number of dramatic arts related performances. I don't think we have that across the country. I think that's the first thing that needs to be fixed, so that the same way that people know, as a lawyer, this is what I'm going to do. There's always activities to be done as a lawyer. It's similarly the case with the artists. In terms of students knowing, I think they do know. First of all, I think the major priority for any student that studies music is to learn their repertoire, ensure that they develop their technique. Because if you've got less developed technique, by the time you finish, you're not going to be able to compete locally and globally so that you are the star musician that you want to be. But also there are other things. It's not just a question of becoming a singer or a performing artist. You can also be a scholar, and you can also be a researcher. You can be, you can work in the archiving industry. You can work as a journalist, as a music arts journalist. So that student should know right at the beginning of their studying that maybe after this degree in music, I'm going to do a postgraduate diploma in journalism and media studies, because I'm very much interested in writing about the arts. And another person might decide, you know, I find working in the archives documenting, doing all sorts of things around the arts, very exciting to me. And so that students might decide to go and do a postgraduate qualification in information sciences. And maybe these days we're also speaking about digital humanities, which include the use of different like multimedia and other forms of media to really document and project and perform and document and record and archive artistic performances, or sometimes the literature around artistic production. But also I think I need to emphasize, Ogoti, we should begin to move away from thinking about Black people singing. I find that a little bit of a reduction of our capabilities. The first thing that people see you was studied in music, they will ask you, what voice do you sing? What voice part are you? I'm not trying to say singing is reduced or is weaker in comparison to other things that people can study in music. But I really think people can study instruments at a very advanced level. I think also people can research music like some of us do. I think it should not be strange to see a Black South African rural born and raised musicologist that studies histories of music, be they local histories, be they global histories. I don't think we should not encourage people to go all the way to studying PhDs in music history, in music performance. We can study up to that level. We don't just simply have to have a 3-year qualification and then you want to get into the industry and that's the end of it. I think if we want to have qualified voice lecturers, researchers in the universities, we need to encourage our students. Our students need to know that getting a master's in music is not really an impossible thing. Getting a doctorate in music is not really an impossible thing. It just needs you to know how to get there. And one of the many ways to get there is just to sit and do your work and work very hard and make sure you get the required marks to get to the next level. And know exactly how to apply for scholarships and which universities to get into, how to get into that. And part of that, of course, we do instill in students, but also as a student, you really always have to be constantly looking for opportunities. You always have to constantly ask yourself, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? And I must assure you, Uma, you don't work as hard and you know little music while you study a degree in music, you're not going to go that far. You really need to, all the people who tell you, who are in Germany, who are in Italy, or Onolvuiso, or Priti, or Musa Ngwana, or Pumeza Machikiza, one thing that seems to be constant about them, they were hardworking students. They knew their stuff. They were a pleasure to work with. They were curious, and they went an extra mile. So if you're a lazy student, you're not going to have all of those opportunities. But if you're a hardworking, open-minded student who really goes out there, then you're going to go as far as anybody else can.
I think one of the webinars that I need to have, in the near future, will be on music scholarship. Because you've mentioned quite a number of ideas there, saying it's not possible, it's not impossible to have a master's in music or a PhD in music. Thank you very much to everyone that has joined us. I'm looking at some comments here. One of them, isuka kumqambi uBongani Magatyana, uthi zingekabikho ii-theatres kwiilokishi zethu kusezokuba nzima kuba basakhela amaholo okubamba intlanganiso, and we need to educate our audience about theatre kuba nakwezi production sibukelana sodwa. With that comment, one of you can start. With that comment in mind, I hope Willem Setiv.
Yeah.
Comment, yes. Now, there's this strange, we have only 10 minutes, there's this strange claim more especially by the Department of Arts and Culture, that the arts industry is not organized. Who has the responsibility of organizing the arts industry in South Africa? Because I believe when you talk education, it's not the teachers who organize education. If you talk health, it's not doctors and nurses and whoever works there that organizes hospitals. And now, Mr. Makajana is saying, for as long as there are no theaters built in the townships, then so who bears that responsibility? Is it not the government itself that always goes out to say the arts industry is not organized? So what's your take on that?
I've heard this notion of the arts industry not being organized, and therefore there's not going to be funding trickling down to the masses. And I find it a problematic notion. I think people on the ground can organize whatever organizing and being organized means. But I really think the Department of Arts and Culture should have very clear policy guidelines and also policies that are actionable. We do not want policies that remain on paper. We do not want structures that remain on paper. I think the Department of Arts and Culture needs to get to a time where they say, we are restructuring the arts landscape in South Africa. This is how it's going to be run, of course, with consultation with the artists, but this is how it's going to be run. We're going to maybe work hand in hand with local councils. We're going to work hand in hand with the Department of Education. We're going to work hand in hand with municipalities so that we know in Doba there is an arts activity in some rural area. There is an arts activity in some small town, whether we say Oudtshoorn or Vokwana, the same way that there's access to arts in Johannesburg and Pretoria and in New York and in Stuttgart and elsewhere in the world. Obviously, what you have in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, in New York, in London, cannot be on the same level, cannot be on the same scale as what you will have Kutsolo. But we simply need a structure that will make it possible for people about Kutsolo to at least go and enjoy an artistic production, be it drama, be it music, even if it's once or twice a year. And we also need policies around things like remuneration. If you have a 4-year qualification, you've got 10 years experience as a teacher, everybody knows how much you earn. It is there, it is a policy, but with a degree in music and you are performer wherever you're performing, you're not sure about going in performances of 500 and going in performances of 5,000 for exactly the same repertoire that you have performed. So as soon as the department works with relevant structures to actually have policies that are active because they are actioned on, and people know, I have 4 years of training, this is what I earn, this is what I deserve, these are my taxes, and this is what they're contributing. The whole thing that happens in other industries, I think that would be of major benefit to the country. Is that happening? I'm not quite sure. I don't think it is happening. The artists out there, if you follow Facebook, if you follow newspapers, if you follow radio programs, the artists are complaining big time. All sorts of artists, from popular music, jazz musicians, teachers in the arts, administrators, everybody is complaining about ways in which the Department of Arts and Culture is not effectively handling the management and the entire value chain of the arts in this country. We cannot blame one another for forever. Something is not happening somewhere, and that needs to be fixed urgently.
I love the closing part of what you've just said, because what I was going to say regarding your question and being organized, what does that mean? What does being organized actually mean? I think we should have a discussion about what does it mean first, because I feel like the answer is different for a lot of people. We all have a different understanding of what being organized means. And I feel like if you want to talk about being organized and we are told to be organized, tell me, what does organized mean? That's number one. And then Uput Bongani and the halls, you know, what we were talking about and about being versatile and coming up with new ways of doing stuff. Cape Town Opera goes to Eslokishini to do what we call youth operas. And I can safely say on this webinar that we've turned Iwolola se Krisani into a mini theater. You know, we need to get to a point where, because I know there's such things as theater in the backyard, where you literally create the backyard of the house and make it a theater stage. You know, there's lots of things that you can do. But what I'm trying to say is that we need to take those halls. Meetings. We can do that. It can be done. I've seen it happen before. So until such a point where we know that in a theater, until then, I think we must take the halls as inazo. And I mean, we have brilliant people in Lokishizet. That because I can tell you right now, the team that I've worked with is from Ekukuletu, is from Ekailich. So they should be able to do that on their own until such a point where we know there's a theater belt Ekailich. And also, again, what does it mean to be organized? That's the first thing we need to actually pin down. What are we talking about when we say we are not organized? Because really, if you take 5 people without talking to each other and ask them, what does it mean to be organized? They'll have different answers. They'll talk about structures. And now you won't really get to the gist of what you're talking about. The government should say, when I say you should be organized, I mean this. Then we go for that. And then if we need help, we say, government, we don't understand this. Help us. Make us do what you want us to do. Here it is, you know? There should be that correspondence between artists and the actual department. What does it mean to be organized?
That's the question that all of us need to engage. Last week and at the beginning of this conversation, I mentioned that we are not here to provide any answers. We're not here to conclude the discussions, but to rather open the conversation and have people, you know, having these conversations. We can continue off and on Facebook, on WhatsApp, wherever you find yourself, you can continue with this. But in the end, we have to get to a point where some of the issues raised here, which we all agree, you know, we need to get to a place where we are able to start sorting these things out. Like, for instance, the question that Masixole is raising, what do we mean by being organized? If we must now put the Department of Arts and Culture into task in terms of telling us, what do you mean? And then when we do this, what are you going to do? Because currently, with regards to the relief fund, the COVID-19, there are many artists out there about Kalayo because they feel they've been excluded on the relief fund, even though they feel they deserve it. Some feel the money was given to people who don't really need it. In fact, everybody needs money, but who are not really suffering compared to others, because there are artists as saying, I can see we're only left with 2 minutes. Because we're talking talent development, education, and career opportunities, there are people who are really working with the young ones out there, Mr. Vokwana, your conductors, your teachers. What advice, based on what we were discussing, what advice would you give just in a minute?
Conductors and teachers must themselves equip themselves more about the arts. They need to know more. The conductors and teachers are our friends. They're our partners. They're our relatives. They're our everything. We go to churches. We go to parties with them. they need to come to ask us. And by us, I'm not necessarily meaning lecturers. They conductors out there know Upumeza. Conductors out there know Umusangongwana. Conductors out there studied with Upritiende. They must go to them and ask, what did it take you to get there? And they should be able to transfer that knowledge to the young ones. I think most people in the arts are quite open and quite willing to share information in terms of their own progress in the field. I think for anyone in any field, if you're curious about knowledge, if you go out there, you use the internet, you flood people with questions in a very polite way, though. We should not step on people's toes and, invade their spaces. They will tell us what needs to be done. They will tell us, when I got into UCT, this is the little I knew, but now that I live in London, this is how things are. And therefore, I suggest to you, Ndoma, you must avoid this, do that, and so on. And of course, everybody must always be willing to change their ways and be like, 2 years ago, this is how I thought, this is how I did things. And 2 years later, things are different.
Mas.
I agree. It's the same thing. I mean, we have an open door policy when it comes to the department that I coordinate at Cape Town Opera, which is the Youth Development and Education. And you can send us your requests because also we don't know all the needs and say, this is the need, how can you assist? And then we take it from there.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Let me apologize on behalf of Umondem Dingi, because last week, he pulled a Jabupule what disappeared, and I thought, let me bring him back so that we can conclude the conversation. And unfortunately, Unomusayende and I could not connect. I could see their names coming up, but we couldn't get sound and picture from them. I hope somewhere, somehow, during the discussions going forward, we will get a chance. I mean, yesterday we tested this thing, and everyone was, able to connect. But today things happened. We apologize about that. I wasn't really lying to you that I will bring in the other two colleagues. Next week, we're talking leadership. I'm not talking about the definition of leadership. I want us to have a look at the structures, the choirs, the provincial, regional, national structures, the construction of those structures, if what we do there fits for the purpose. Not necessarily who do we elect, not necessarily what leadership is. And the week after, we will be talking business of choral music. Are we in this as a hobby, or can we actually conduct this as a business? So we will talk about that in 2 weeks' time. But for today, thank you very much for joining me. Mr. Vokwana, Mr. Makwethu, it's been a pleasure. And thanks everybody who was watching on our live stream. But for today, thank you very much. Sharp, sharp.